episode 296 of the CRICKETher Weekly.
We're closing in on that 300, Raf.
Oh, we are, aren't we? It's exciting.
Nervous 90s.
Nervous 290s. Sid, we've been watching a bit more of WBBL this week, and you're pleased because the Hurricanes are still top of the table.
Yeah, lost a game now, but still top.
It was going to happen at some point. So have Hurricanes qualified?
Yeah, well, I don't know this yet. I could have run it this morning. It would have taken a couple of hours to run this morning, but if I wait until after the game that's currently being played, I should be able to run it. I'm going to run it a little bit later today, have a look on our Blue Sky feed and check out whether or not they have qualified already or whether or not they still need some wins. Okay.
And what was your match of the week, Sid? Because it wasn't one involving the Canes, was it?
No, well, there's been a couple of exciting matches this week. So there was an exciting match, Scorchers v Strikers, which went down to the penultimate ball. So it was like one wicket versus 2 runs, and then Darcey Brown caught, I think she was off the penultimate ball, with 2 runs still left needed. So that was a really exciting game. But I want to talk a bit about the Stars versus the Sixers, because that was just quite a remarkable game of cricket, which started off with one amazing performance, and then there was another amazing performance that almost eclipsed it. So Meg Lanning kind of rolled back the years and scored 135 off 74 balls. So a really rapid, dominating 100. And it was just really effortless. And it was like, we always remember Meg Lanning's 100 at Chelmsford. And we were sitting together in the press box at Chelmsford during the Women's Ashes. Can't remember what year it was.
2019.
And she scored, like 15, and we turned to each other and we're like, she's going to score 100 here. She just looked like she was unstoppable.
Yeah.
And this innings was a little bit like that. And even Meg Lanning only plays in a couple of those innings, in her entire career.
Yeah.
I absolutely don't think it's her greatest innings. I've seen that thrown around with some, people getting over dramatic about it. It wasn't a greater innings than the one at Chelmsford, for example. And she's played a lot of very great ones. But fantastic to see her do that. Very dominant performance. It was at North Sydney Oval, which obviously it's quite an intimate ground, quite a small ground. So you think, okay, the boundaries are reasonably easy to find compared to some of the bigger grounds. It looked like, is it going to be a bit of a road? And they came off at the innings break, and you were like, well, okay, it's clearly, given that Meg, a great player, but she's definitely kind of easing towards retirement, shall we say. She's still knocking out runs in WBBL, but she's not the dominant player that she once was. And you're like, okay, well, it was just obviously a really good pitch, and the batting's obviously reasonably easy there. But the Stars came out, and Kim Garth came out and was just bowled remarkably. And it was already raining when the Stars came out. Within 4 overs, they'd gone off because it was raining. So they really tried to stay on. They'd gone off because it was raining so hard they couldn't continue. And Kim Garth had already taken 4 wickets for 3 runs in 2 overs.
Oh my goodness me!
And it was just Kim Garth obviously grew up in Ireland, so presumably used to playing with a wet ball, because every time she went, it rains. For those who don't know, it rains all the time in Ireland, basically. So
that's why it's such a beautiful
every time
country.
It is, yeah. That's why it's the green fields of Ireland, because it rains so much.
Yeah.
But every time she would have played as a kid, she would have been used to playing with a wet ball. Well, she took all that wet ball experience with her, and just a remarkable spell of quick bowling, and suddenly it was like, well, this is obviously a bowler's pitch, then, isn't it? It's like they completely changed the pitch.
So they were obviously trying to stay on for the 5 overs that you need to constitute an innings.
So they had to come off. So with 4 overs done, they came off. So still 6 balls needed to be bowled in order to complete the game. And so with the Sixers already 4 wickets down, and it's like, well, there's no way they're going to win. And it kind of felt a bit unfair. And people noticed this on social media, didn't they?
So we should say they did go back out after
Yeah, they did go back out. And then
they were able to...
Yeah, Sixers were ultimately bowled out for 42. So a huge way. Stars' net run rate is now up there. Now, it's a bit like England in the World Cup. That one game has absolutely catapulted them
Yeah.
that run rate. Obviously, it's almost impossible for them to their net run rate now to stay up there. Whatever they do, it's going to now start to come down again. But at the moment, it's very high indeed.
So it's great that they did manage to get out there. But as you say, when they came off initially, there was a debate on social media, and particularly Global Cricket had this to say: if this Stars v Sixers game is washed out by some hometown rain, do the rules that require a minimum of 5 overs to be bowled in the second innings of a T20 need to be revised? Are there some positions where one team's position is so overwhelming that a result should be awarded?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of had a little bit of this discussion in the World Cup, didn't we, around that England-Pakistan game, for example, where Pakistan looked like they were definitely going to win the game, and because it didn't make sufficient number of overs as well.
But that was a bit different because that was talking about being able to start the game and say we're going to reduce the number of overs each side has to face. This is actually saying, well, if you don't quite manage to get in 5 overs,
can we put in some kind of calculation? I mean, the bottom line is, I think that calculations are obviously, okay, we talk about calculations with DLS. It's important to stress that technically they're not calculations, they're statistical tables. So there's no calculation going on. It's all pre-generated data. And then the computer looks up and goes, okay, if it's this many runs and this many balls and they scored that many runs, then this is the target kind of thing. But let's call them calculations. And you could layer something on top of that said, well, if you've played 4 overs or if you've played like 15% of the game and you're this much ahead, then, we can declare a winner. If you've played 3 overs and you're this much more ahead, then you can declare a winner. So it's sort of sliding scale there. So the closer you get to that cut-off point of 5 overs where you go, yes, we have got a game, if you're overwhelmingly ahead at that point, so it feels something that's realistic to do. There was one big flaw somebody pointed out, which is quite difficult to indicate this to the players on the field. That the DLS at the moment, you can put that up on the scoreboard and it's really clear to the players on the field exactly what the state of the game is. Whereas this would kind of mask that and make it difficult for anyone to know exactly what the state of the game was at that point. But you've got some other thoughts, Raf.
I just think it would be completely unworkable. I think that you have to draw a line somewhere and you have to say, look, in order for this to actually be a cricket match, we have to have a minimum number of overs faced by each side. And 5 is already pushing it. The matches that we've seen that have ended up being 5 overs versus 5 overs as a kind of bish bash bosh T20. Fortunately, there haven't been many of them, but they've just not been.
I think we've only seen one in our entire time. Remember, there's that West Indies England one. That's the only one I think I've ever seen in professional cricket. Yeah.
And so, as I say, fortunately, they're quite rare because they don't really tell you anything particularly. It's such a kind of hits and giggles type.
Well, it's the equivalent of penalties in football, isn't it? It's like.
Yes, but when you're doing penalties in football, you've already had 90 minutes and then an extra half an hour, and you can't have and nothing has separated the two sides. This is the equivalent of saying we will decide the result of this important match with just penalties, isn't it? Potentially. Yeah. So yes, one side could come out and be incredibly dominant for a few overs. Yes, they could, but cricket is funny, and funny things happen, and things can turn things can turn on a dime, and things can change very quickly. And I'd be quite uncomfortable actually about saying, oh well, look at that, this is just a really random example, but oh my goodness, Australia have put 330 on the board in this World Cup semi-final. India are never going to chase it. Doesn't matter whether they get out there and manage to bat any overs because this is Australia and India are never going to get there. Oh wait, they did get there. So now that's an extreme example, but it kind of almost then just comes down to a bit of value judgment, doesn't it? Because you're going, well, even though we haven't really seen this side, they've only been out there for 5 or 10 minutes, but nevertheless, we're going to say that one side was dominant on the day. You would never have a cricket match where one side bats and the other side doesn't get to bat, but you decide the result, because that's not cricket. That's not how it works. There's a reason why there's that cliche of you can't make a judgment until both sides have batted on this pitch. Right. So I think that yes, there will be desperately frustrating situations. Fortunately, this one didn't end up this way, where it doesn't constitute a match, despite the fact that it was very clear that one side were going to win. But the alternative is to just tear everything up and go, oh well, let's just dispense with the kind of fundamentals of cricket, which I'm also quite uncomfortable with. Even 5 overs in a T20 is a very tiny amount. Anyway, it was an interesting debate, Sid. So yeah, WBBL continues apace. There's been some other interesting news this week. On a completely different, just a completely shift. Although it does involve Ireland, so I suppose there's a kind of Kim Garth-esque segue there, because this is about the fact that South Africa have announced their ODI and T20 squads to face Ireland. So South Africa are heading over to Ireland, aren't they?
No, the other way around. Sure.
Sorry, Ireland are heading over to South Africa.
Unless they want to play in the rain and it being quite cold.
That's what confused me. Sorry, Ireland are obviously heading over to South Africa. Now these matches don't constitute, so the ODIs won't constitute part of the Women's Championship. So it's a little bit of an opportunity for probably both teams to kind of just try a few things out, try a few things that are different. But the thing that has caught the headlines and has obviously caught our attention is that Dane van Niekerk has been selected for South Africa for both the ODI and the T20 squads. And there's still a sort of question about whether she will actually be selected, whether she will actually play. But South Africa have said that they're going to rest some of their big players for the ODIs, having just played in a World Cup. So Cap, Kaka, Tryon, de Klerk and Klaas are all being rested for the ODIs. So actually that's probably a reasonable opportunity for Dane van Niekerk too.
I mean, none of them are quite direct replacements. But...
No, but you've got quite a few kind of big names.
Yeah, it's experience. About experience. It's about bringing in someone with a lot of experience that kind of covers those, because they're all experienced players. So yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so that's kind of interesting. I mean, this is if she does play again, which it looks, as I say, it looks quite likely. This is going to be a very, very interesting. An interesting opportunity for her, and interesting for everybody else, because generally speaking, the pace at which women's cricket develops and is still developing, I think, it is so rare for anybody to kind of declare their retirement from international cricket and then nearly 3 years later say, actually, no, I'm going to play again. So I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how she gets on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's, as you say, 3 years is a long time. And
yeah.
I mean, I just continue to hope, and I kind of said this when we talked about her before the World Cup, because of course, prior to the World Cup, there was also talk about her coming, because she went back and kind of joined up with the squad and participated in one of the training camps. And I just really hope this is coming from a place of her understanding, what her journey is and where she's going with this. I hope it isn't just her looking back going, I'm really struggling to kind of find a place in the world outside of, being a cricket player. She's done some bits of commentary, but interestingly, she didn't do commentary in the World Cup. Other people seem to have, kind of got in that boat ahead of her. Like the Tash Farron, for example, who grabbed her opportunity with both hands and, was commentating through the World Cup. So, I just want her to be coming from a good place of going, this is what I'm doing with my life. This is my plan going forwards, rather than her desperately looking backwards, because I just don't think that's a healthy thing to be doing. But hopefully she understands what she's doing. I'm sure she does.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm slightly surprised because the South Africa coach, Mshimbi, was quite dismissive of when there was all this talk about her potentially being in the World Cup, the actual World Cup squad, not the training squad.
Yeah, because of course when she was selected for the training squad, everyone went, "Oh, she's going to be back for the World Cup."
She's going to play in the World Cup, and he was very dismissive of that actually, and he sort of said, "Oh, no, well, she needs to tick all these boxes," and it was all a bit odd, and we talked at the time on the CRICKETher Weekly about how the communication around it had just been terrible, and if I'd been Dane van Niekerk, I would have been like a little bit hurt about the way that the whole thing was handled, because as I say, he just did seem like he was really very
blunt,
very blunt, and very much like, oh well, she's in this big she's in this big training camp, but of course she's not going to play in the World Cup. Don't be ridiculous. That was the kind of tone of it. That's how it came across. And now we're a couple of months down the line. South Africa, by the way, did quite well in the World Cup that's just happened. Don't know if people noticed. They did get to the final, having knocked out England in the semi-final. And yet he's decided that she now is in a place to kind of bring her in. I suppose it does come down to the fact that these are not championship ODIs. As we say, that South Africa are going to rest some of their top players. And so this is a kind of bit of an opportunity. But I kind of agree with you. I think it's going to be a real shame if she ends up playing these ODIs against Ireland and then doesn't get, that's not a kind of clear trajectory back into playing for them regularly in the ODI side, because that's not really very helpful for anyone. So hopefully the communication with her has been better than the sort of botched communication around all this in the build-up to the World Cup. But it'd be very interesting to see how she gets on, and obviously we wish her all the very best.
Right, now, Raf, our friends watching us will be shocked to know that you've been to another boozy lunch this week.
No, it wasn't a boozy lunch. It was a boozy dinner.
Oh, okay.
A boozy dinner.
Subtle difference.
Yeah.
So you've been up to another boozy dinner with the Cricket Society, with your friends at the Cricket Society. And this one was celebrating the 80th anniversary of the Cricket Society. And you made a little speech, which we're going to get to in a minute, celebrating the Cricket Society. But I think that the one thing that I found really interesting, because I learned all this week, is that the Cricket Society, and I kind of sort of gently chide the Cricket Society because it's the thing for sort of middle-aged men. And there's actually two issues with that. First of all is that, look in the mirror, Sid.
No comment, sweetie.
And the second is that actually, if I went to the Cricket Society, I'd be one of the younger people there. There was someone there that was nearly 90 at this lunch, wasn't there?
There was. So one of our oldest members actually reminisced about having gone to watch the men's victory tests in 1948, which is just incredible. So
anyway, but quite a progressive organisation, because one of their quite early things that they did, long before the MCC were admitting women, a very special woman in the history of the Women's Cricket Association became quite an important figure in the Cricket Society. And you spoke about her. Tell us all about her, Raf.
Yeah, so the first thing to say is the Cricket Society, if you've done your maths, formed in 1945, so just after the Second World War, and women were allowed to be members right from the outset. They actually had a special kind of drive to recruit more women members in the 1950s, and they worked with the Women's Cricket Association, and in particular Netta Rheinberg, to try to promote, try to almost like cross-pollinate and get more members of the Women's Cricket Association to be members of the Cricket Society. So this was a very progressive thing to be doing at a period where, the MCC is still kind of decades away from admitting female members.
Yeah.
And they do have a good amount of women members now. So if any women are watching this and are interested in joining, then it's a wonderful organisation, and they have loads of great events. So Google the Cricket Society and you'll be able to find out how you can join. But back to Netta Rheinberg. A huge figure in the history of women's cricket as well as the Cricket Society. So she was the tour manager on England women's first two post-war overseas tours, which were both to Australia and New Zealand in 1948-49 and 1957-58. She was also WCA secretary between 1948 and 1958. She edited Women's Cricket magazine, and she ended up writing a regular column for the CRICKETher about women's cricket. And unusually for a kind of high-level cricketer of male or female, she was also Jewish actually, and she remains the only Jewish person ever to have played Ashes cricket, because she was manager on this post-war tour in 1948-49.
So she didn't go as a player, she went as a sort of their administrator.
Exactly, and, she was making all the arrangements for hotels and trains, and they obviously caught the boat out there, so she was in charge of that. But then there was a kind of spate of injuries, and in particular a player called Joan Wilkinson, who was meant to be playing in the Adelaide Test in 1949, went to see a doctor and was found to have ulcers on her eyes that required I know. It required obviously immediate treatment, so she couldn't play. So the other kind of leading players said, well, Netta, you're going to have to play. So, I mean, just imagine the kind of incredible pressure that puts on you. And what happened? Well, has not got a happy ending, unfortunately. She was stumped in the first innings, and then she was actually clean bowled first ball in the second innings by Betty Wilson. So she made a pair. So it's a bit humiliating. I've read her tour diary. She wrote, "I use every swear word imaginable beneath my breath and feel utterly disgusted." So that's her claim to fame in terms of women's cricket. In terms of the Cricket Society, she joined the executive committee in 1961. She was membership secretary, and then she became the vice chairman. Definitely it was the vice chairman at the time. So that was 1967, and she actually did that for 23 years. Now I'm currently vice...
And she eventually was allowed to join the MCC, wasn't she? She was one of the women that...
Yeah, she became one of the first 10 female members of MCC in 1999 after that kind of lengthy battle throughout the 1990s.
And she died quite shortly after that, didn't she?
She died in 2006, yeah. I was just going to say that I'm currently vice chair of the Cricket Society, and it feels a little bit like I'm following in her footsteps, but I don't know that I'm going to end up doing it.
You're probably not going to be able to play Test cricket for England.
No, and I'm probably not going to end up becoming vice chair of the Cricket Society for 23 years either. Anyway, she definitely, there's some really interesting kind of history between the Cricket Society and kind of female members, sort of with Netta Rheinberg kind of leading the charge. So they actually held cheese and wine parties for the touring Australians in 1963 and the touring New Zealanders in 1966. And then when Australia came back in 1976, I think cheese and wine parties were maybe a bit passé by then. So they had a boat cruise along the Thames.
Cheese and wine parties
instead.
were definitely a thing in the sort of Jewish community in London in the 1960s and 70s, because my family are from that same community. Weirdly, my sister's a teacher, works at the school where Netta Rheinberg went to school in North London. And my family are were part of that community. So cheese and wine parties were definitely a big thing in the 60s. Everyone had a cheese and wine party.
Wow, and including the touring Australians in New Zealand.
Well, I agree that certainly by the 80s, yes, there were things your grandparents did.
Oh, we should revive cheese and wine parties.
Okay, let's have a cheese and wine party, Raf.
Everyone's
invited to the
CRICKETher cheese and wine party. Come along. Comment below the line if you'd like to come.
Sorry, we're done.
No, it's all good fun. Finally, this week, Sid, I just wanted to wrap up by giving a shout out and a well done to Scotland. We talked in last week's episode about the Emerging Nations Trophy. Scotland are currently top of the table. They on the first 2 days of the tournament, they beat both Uganda and Tanzania. And the star for Scotland so far has certainly been Darcey Carter. She's hit a couple of half centuries. She picked up a fourfer against Tanzania. So good for her and good for Scotland. Keep it up, bring the trophy home. And let's hope this is a precursor to qualifying for the T20 World Cup in England and Wales next year, because that's
what
really
we
cool.
all want to see.
Absolutely. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Bye.